Business Latest is brought to you by the Qatar Tourism Authority and Catalan.
Whether it's nature or man-made, an event or a memory, time affects our perception and tests our will. Places we go and things we see determine what we know and who we are. Open your eyes to a world of documentaries. Witness at this time on AlJazeera.
Can you imagine what 900 trillion cubic feet of gas looks like? Often 10,000 feet below the surface. Now try and imagine the technology needed to extract it. Then distributing that gas to a far-off and energy-hungry world. We believe in pushing technology to its limits. Now try and imagine a world without Qatar gas.
The fight for Libya. As casualties rise, doctors warn they're running out of supplies. I'm Lauren Taylor. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also ahead,
the immediate departure of Muammar Gaddafi within 72 hours.
The deal to unseat Gaddafi and the conflicting demands from the opposition. Also on the programme, minority rights in the new Egypt. Coptic Christians take to the streets of Cairo.
And I'm supposed to be in the community to be very silent, to be seen, but not to be heard.
On International Women's Day, we visit a community of Maasai women in Kenya working to improve their lives through education. Hello. Leave within 72 hours, the latest demand from Libya's opposition rebels. They're asking Muammar Gaddafi to stop bombing his people in return for immunity from prosecution in Libya. This after reports that Gaddafi had tried to negotiate an exit strategy. All the while, the fighting continues. There are reports that Gaddafi's tanks and warplanes are bombarding the town of Zawiya outside the capital Tripoli. Libyan state television says Gaddafi's forces have recaptured the town, but the rebels insist they're still inside the city. Moving over to Bin Jawad, well, these are the latest pictures of the fighting there. Rebels having to contend with aerial bombardment, and the injuries sustained are brutal. And in Ras Lanuf, witnesses have talked of as many as 6 airstrikes. Reports suggest that residents are having to leave in a hurry. Jackie Rowland has the day's developments.
The rebels of eastern Libya have become mired in a battle for 50 kilometres of desert terrain. Each time they try to advance on Bin Jawad, pro-Gaddafi troops push them back. And the rebels are increasingly on the defensive at their own forward position in the oil town of Ras Lanuf. Once again, Gaddafi's forces exploit their advantage from the air. The rebel army is a sitting target in this open terrain. They fire back randomly. Some of these fighters have never handled a weapon before.
What happened is that a warplane came and started to bomb a water plant that feeds the Ras Lanuf area, including hospitals and businesses in the city.
The hospitals of eastern Libya are inundated with the wounded. This man has been shot in the spine. Doctors fear he may be paralyzed from the neck down. But most of the injuries are not sustained in fighting against Gaddafi's forces. The rebels are untrained and undisciplined. They are wounding each other with reckless gunfire.
We are in a crisis right now. If the situation and the shelling continue, then we will not be able to cope at all. We will have to stop.
What the rebels lack in training and in strategy, they make up for in enthusiasm and the conviction that they are fighting for a just cause. But this is not enough to break through Gaddafi's forces, who appear to have drawn a line in the sand just outside Bin Jawad. This far, but no further. Bin Jawad is less than 200 kilometres from Gaddafi's stronghold of Sirte, and that's perilously close. Sirte is home to Gaddafi's tribe, where he can command most loyal support. There's also an important military base there with heavy weapons. If Sirte were to fall into rebel hands, that would be the beginning of the end for Muammar Gaddafi. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera in eastern Libya.
There appears to be a split within the ranks of the Opposition National Council regarding a possible deal with Muammar Gaddafi. Hoda Abdelhamid has more from Benghazi.
Conflicting messages coming out of the Opposition National Council here in Benghazi. Earlier in the day, the head of the council and former Justice Minister indicated that there have been some sort of indirect talks with the leadership in Tripoli. The head of the council called for an immediate cessation of violence, gave 72 hours for Gaddafi to step down and leave the country along with his family. And in that case, he said he may consider not prosecuting Gaddafi or members of his family in front of a Libyan court. But then by mid-afternoon, we heard a completely different story from the spokesman of the National Council, and this is what he had to say.
Our demands are as clear as the revolution. We are not negotiating at all. We have appealed to the United Nations to impose a no-fly zone in Libya to protect our families and to prevent any aircraft attacks like the ones you are hearing about.
In any case, it would be very difficult for the Opposition National Council to accept some sort of deal with Gaddafi. I think by and large, the Libyan people do want to see him prosecuted, not only for what happened since this uprising started, but for what they say are 42 years of massacres and killings and corruption.
Meanwhile, the diplomatic wrangling over what to do about Libya is continuing. John Terrett is at the White House for us with the latest reaction from the United States. So, John, any reaction there on this potential deal?
Well, that's right, Lauren. There has been within the past hour or so. And let me just remind everybody that in the past 12 to 24-hour news cycle, there's been a lot of talk about whether Colonel Gaddafi and his family and his regime might be given exile in another country, but more importantly, given an easy exit. In other words, let off the hook and not brought to punishment for any of their alleged crimes. And as you know, we're still waiting to hear from Colonel Gaddafi. The red carpet has been rolled out and he's yet to come out, but we expect him to come out at some point today, and it's thought that he may well comment on this idea. Well, within the past hour, PJ Crowley, who is the senior State Department spokesman here in Washington, D.C., pushed back very strongly against the notion, A, of Gaddafi and his family being given exile in another country, and most especially the thought of him being allowed to get away with his alleged crimes. This is how PJ Crowley put it within the last hour or so. What is the State Department's view on the possibility of Mr. Gaddafi and his family being given an easy exit? In other words, that he could be forgiven for what he's done and not brought to trial.
Well, let's separate those two things out. We want to see Gaddafi, step down, and one would infer